That was my first meeting back after a little bit of a sabbatical from the CAC. I'm very happy to be back. I work on population and public health for the local hospital in St. Albans at Northwestern Medical Care Center. So glad to be back among the lake advocates, and I'm excited for the work that we have ahead. I see Bob has his hand up.
I just want to congratulate you, Denise, on, I know how strong you advocated for this position and how you got it. Everyone gets that joke, I hope.
I think I raised my hand one too many times at the last meeting, so they made me the vice chair. We can do some welcome and introductions. I think we have some members of the public on the meeting tonight. I don't know if we want to go around the room. I certainly do not know everybody on this call right now. So maybe we take a few minutes and just go around. If everybody could introduce themselves, that would be great. And if you could turn your camera on, that would be very helpful for me. Takes me a few times. Who wants to start? Bob, why don't you start since your hand is still up?
Okay, fine. I'm Bob Fisher. I'm the water quality superintendent for the city of South Burlington. I'm also the NUIA vice president and many other things. Thank you.
Welcome. I'm going to go, I guess, my screen from around Vic.
Good evening. Vic Putman, chair of the New York Citizens Advisory Committee, as far as I know. We're waiting for official notifications. Thank you.
Welcome, Vic. Thank you for joining.
Mm-hmm.
And Carol Ode, representative.
Yes, Carol Ode. I represent the far new north end of Burlington, Vermont. I serve on the House Ways and Means Committee, but I served for 4 years on the House Natural Resources Fish and Wildlife Committee.
Awesome. Thank you for coming. And then I see Representative Dolan on the call. Carrie.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carrie Dolan. I'm the state representative for Washington 7 District, which is in the headwaters of Lake Champlain, for the communities of Duxbury, Moortown, Fayston, Waitsfield, and Warren. And I sit on as the clerk on the Natural Resources Fish and Wildlife Committee.
Awesome. Welcome. Thank you for joining. And Katie.
Hi, Katie Dar, the Citizen Advisory Committee Coordinator with the Basin Program.
And Brenda Gail Bergman.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brenda. I'm working with the Nature Conservancy as our Director for Freshwater and Science in Vermont. And I'm really grateful to be able to join you today. I do have a hard stop at 6:15 though, so I'll have to jump out a little early.
Thanks for joining. And Hillary Solomon. I hope I'm saying everybody's names right.
Hi, Hillary Solomon with the Polton Meadowy Natural Resource Conservation District down in the South Lake of Champlain. And I have to leave at 6:45, so I apologize if you can see me sort of exit the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Lauren.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lauren Jeunesse, and I'm an environmental analyst at the Lake Champlain Basin Program. I'll be in the background of these meetings, helping out with notes and logistics for Katie.
Thanks for doing that work, Lauren. It's very much appreciated. And can be challenging, so thank you. Ricky Lauren.
Hi, my name's Ricky Lauren. I'm with the New York CAC, and I do a lot with the Lions Club as well, but the lake is very important.
Awesome. Thanks for joining. Nice to have some New York folks on the call. Tom Barry, I think I see. I don't see your picture, your photo, but I see your bubble. There he is.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Flip side into this position, huh? Tom Barry, Senator Leahy's office.
I can't get away.
Yeah, I like to look in on these meetings occasionally.
Good. Well, welcome. We're always grateful to have you, and grateful for the senator's work on everything. So thanks for joining us. I see a Coleman. I can't see anything but a COLMA. I don't know who that is. Did I miss somebody? Sarah Coleman?
That's me.
Hi.
Sarah Coleman, Vermont Coordinator to the Lake Champlain Basin Program in Vermont DEC.
Great. Well, thanks for
Happy
joining,
September.
everybody. Katie, do you want to share the agenda again? It says public comment, so we have some time for that. If anybody from the public would like to make any comments, I think that's what I'm seeing next on the agenda. Anybody? All right, hearing no public comment, we'll move on to the third item on the agenda, which is the action item is to review and vote on our draft July 21st meeting summary notes.
I'll make
I
that.
don't think we have a quorum.
Oh, we don't?
I
There's a
don't
lot of people in
believe
that.
so.
How many?
Yeah,
We have 5 members present and 7 are missing.
I believe 7's a quorum, right?
yeah, I believe so.
Majority's a
Yeah,
quorum.
7 would be quorum and 6 would be a tie.
So we can't take that. We can't get a motion to approve the minutes or the meeting summary from last month, from July.
Yeah, we'll have to move that to the next meeting.
Okay. If other members join before the end of the meeting, then maybe we can vote on that. Does that make sense, Katie?
Yes.
Okay. And like I said, I cannot open up any documents because of this new security thing that I did not implement on my computer. Our next thing on the agenda is a discussion about our action plan and to create an action plan, work plan or work group, and to determine who wants to be part of the action plan work group membership. In past years, and I'm not sure how it's been done since I left, but all of the CAC meeting or members participated in the action plan work group. However, we don't need to do it that way. We could have just a small committee of people working on it. I know that Mark was going to take the notes from our meeting last month. We met, and I can't believe that was just last Friday, but we met at the end of last week to talk about what we wanted to do. And it was determined that we would update the last year's action plan and use our discussion from our meeting, from the meeting summary from July to update the action plan and be able to create a work group to edit that document so that we kind of got a jump on it this year. How does that sound to the rest of the CAC members?
Good.
Do we want to break out into, do we want to have a smaller work group or do we want to have it be just part of our agenda? Or do we want to try and get it
Nice
done?
if a work group brings a draft to the whole meeting and then we can just, start from there.
Hillary, do you want to be on that work group?
I don't know.
I love that idea. Katie, did Mark give any edits over the weekend?
I did not get any edits.
I didn't see an email from him either. Okay. I think we're kind of starting at 0. Is there any way to pull up the Word document with the action plan from last year? So for those of you that aren't aware of this, but the CAC creates an action plan every year that we bring to the legislative bodies of our state, Vermont, for us. And then we also use it for media outreach. And it's our priorities for the year that we want to address during the legislative session. Katie, did I summarize that okay?
I think so, but some other people on the call have been involved with that process longer than I have. So if anyone else has additions, please.
That's what I'm remembering from a few years ago. Bob, do you have anything to add to what I just?
Nothing has changed. You're correct. We have done subcommittees several times, but it's been a couple of years. Probably the majority was done by the group. As you would know, you were on as long as me as I have been, if not longer.
Yeah, I like the subcommittee. If we could get a work group, I think was how we were wording it. Because really it's really drafting a document together and then presenting it to the full CAC for approval.
Yeah, pre-COVID, you would meet 1 hour before. Generally, it's Shelburne or wherever we were at, and that was the working group was 1 hour before. We did not do it last year that I remember or at all since the whole COVID thing.
All right, well then I think what I would suggest is if you want to be part of the work group to redraft the action plan for 2022, please send Katie, myself, and Mark an email. And this is the Word document from last year's 2021 Lake Champlain Action Plan. You want to just scroll down a little bit so we can just kind of get a sense of the top headings. Thank you, Katie, for doing this, by the way. So invest in natural and developed infrastructure, investment in natural and developed infrastructure. Investment in public access and recreation economy. Aquatic invasive species prevention needs support. I think that's been on there since I was part of the CAC years ago. Investment in agricultural transition to sustainability. Consolidation of water quality enforcement. And then next generation toxic pollution. And I think that's the last one. And this turns into a front and back kind of glossy piece with photos on it. So the work of the work group would be to take what we currently have, edit it so that it reflects what our 2022 priorities are going to be, and then bring it back to the CAC, the full CAC for approval. Does that sound about right?
Sounds good to me.
All right, so is that, oh, somebody's raising their hand. Colleen. Hi, Colleen.
Hi, Denise. Sorry to be a few minutes late. I just wanted, in case people missed it, Lauren has posted the final version of that CAC action plan in the sidebar conversation. So you can find the link to it there.
Yeah, I'm not following the chat, so I appreciate you letting people know. Thank you. And that's on the Lake Champlain Basin Program website as well, correct?
Correct. It's on the Vermont Citizens Advisory webpage, and a link to all of the action plans can be found at the bottom of that webpage. Okay. I'll put a direct link to the Vermont CAC webpage as well.
Awesome. And I see Bob has his hand up, and maybe Carol.
Just a quick comment that it's a living document, and it doesn't change wholeheartedly, as you well know, Denise. I mean, there's usually 5 to 6 topics. I don't know if we ever had 7, and generally one will fall off, although they're all important, and then a new one will come on. Like the CEC, I think was a new one last year. The contaminants of emerging concern, but it's more or less a living document that, so it's not, I've never seen it completely different, just to give some background that it just grows.
Thank you for that. Carol?
Thank you, Denise. Well, the question I have is, we seem to be talking more and talking earlier about what our legislative priorities might be. And so, and there's a lot of funding coming in to the state, thanks to Senator Leahy's office and others in Washington. And I just wonder if we would want to consider adding other initiatives that we have are going to be working toward regarding legislation that we'll be working toward, and or funding that we think we should be able to secure now, where there is a lot of one-time, we may never see it again, funding coming to the state. So, for example, money to separate stormwater overflow in cities, in the wastewater treatment facilities and on the streets, whatever. So is that something that we would want to, if we decided as a group that we really want to work toward that, if that's a high priority, that we talk about that, so that maybe the things that we've been having in our report for the past few years, like invasive species and so forth, would be a very small part of that two-sided piece, and that we would go wholeheartedly towards securing funding while we can fight for funding for water. So that I mentioned one thing, but solid waste and PFAS contaminants and what we're going to do about that. Okay, those are two things. I won't keep going, but I think we should think about a little bit of a different way that this will be organized this time.
And I raised my hand again. Sorry.
Yeah.
I raised my hand so much. Well, I've always been a little more proactive in these meetings. I agree 100% with Representative Carol here. This is one-time money coming down, and I've been on several national calls, and it does seem a lot of it's me targeted for CSOs, combined sewer overflows. So I'm not saying that maybe we should diminish it, and this should be probably the new topic, in my opinion. Thank you.
Tom, I'm curious if you have an update from Leahy's office on the funding that's. Oh, you're muted.
Happy to provide a very brief update now. It's probably subject for a meeting, but there is, the state has a lot of funds through ARPA that are being directed to water quality, and other funding lines are looking very strong right now if we pass the bills that are under consideration. So it does make sense if you want to provide some input on use of funding. An example would be the funding that flows through the Lake Champlain Basin program. The president's budget request for the program was $20 million this year. They're at 15 in FY21, and they've been on like $2 million a year increases for several years. They would bump from 15 to 20 with the president's budget, and then the infrastructure bill that passed with a bipartisan majority in the Senate has $40 million over 5 years for the program, which would equate obviously to probably $8 million a year. So there will be a fair amount of funding available if all of these bills pass. Just that one example, close to $30 million for the Basin program, $28 million in FY22. So that would be on top of the ARPA dollars and very significant increases in the state revolving fund. for clean water and for drinking water to the state of Vermont in the infrastructure bill as well. So there's, if we can pass the infrastructure bill and the FY22 spending bill, even apart from the reconciliation package, there should be a very substantial increase in funding availability for the next year and then several years to follow.
That's exciting news. I mean, I do remember a time that we actually did focus on funding when with the CAC and had that as our priority headline, I guess you would call it, of the entire thing and where we wanted the money directed and the formation of the Clean Water Board. Carrie, I see your hand up.
Thank you. And thank you, Tom, for that update. It's just so exciting to see that kind of leadership, because it's, as we all know, it's much needed funding to address all our needs. So I truly appreciate that. I am interested to know how the state can actually spend those dollars. You know, do we have the capacity? How do we support that capacity? What about workforce? So while there are other priorities, and I, for one, believe we ought to keep nuisance species on the list as toxics, we still need and struggle in partnership with the other states. The objective of restoring the lake and the watershed, but how do we do that collaboratively to ensure that we have the capacity to spend these dollars to meet our long-term clean water targets? When I look at the state's annual report, for example, I see not only, I recognize that COVID was pretty darn disruptive across the board, but it also is telling when you look at state dollars spent and how depressed that is, even with the available dollars. I worry about our state capacity. So I, for one, believe that keeping clean water funding and our efforts to achieve those goals also means ensuring that we have the right infrastructure, human infrastructure in place, technical infrastructure in place to actually get the work done.
Carol, your hand's up. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Carrie.
I'm wondering, Tom Barry, if you can tell us whether there are going to be very strict date timelines before which we need to complete the project, so we can think about what Carrie's saying and then think about how we can get these projects done.
Well, again, a lot of what I talked about hasn't quite become law yet, but various timelines will apply. I think guidance and input through your process to the state and other policymakers on how you think the dollars would best be spent could be helpful. As far as timelines, the infrastructure bill is a 5-year timeline, and so there would be, you know, those dollars to be spent out over those fiscal years. And if the reconciliation package passes, it's more of like a 10-year timeline. And although Congress put some fairly strict timelines on the initial COVID relief packages, with the larger ARPA one, there was a lot more flexibility on the timing to spend down the dollars. And so there will be time frames, but it is probably not the primary issue that we would need input on, or, you know, the input on would be tremendously helpful there. The dollars will need to be spent, and the bandwidth, as Carrie gets to with the state agency, and then, you know, with the folks like the utilities to actually implement projects will become a concern for sure. But the timeframes won't be as prescriptive as some of the earlier COVID relief packages were.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good information. Thank you. Mark, welcome.
Hi, sorry everybody.
Okay,
Had a
Carrie.
little mishap with my tractor and got stuck a mile away, so it was a long walk.
It's a nice day for a long walk.
Well, timing wasn't great for a breakdown.
No. Well, welcome. Carrie.
Thank you. I just wanted to also just reiterate something that Carol Odie had mentioned about CSOs. This may be, with all what we just said about our needs, priorities, and workforce support to get the work done, this may be the time may be right for us as a region to address our combined sewer overflow problem, because it's typically a high cost problem. We've been dwindling the numbers down over time, but with the added infusion of federal support, again, thanks to our good dear senator, this may be, in fact, a great strategy for us to. It's an expensive proposition, but we may this may be the right time for that.
And one thing that came up that I'm remembering from our retreat a couple months ago was, hang on. Sorry, my husband just walked in and started talking over me. Is that we had talked about smaller towns and their inability to process waste as well. And so that again is another expensive proposition. Not sure if that's something we also want to focus on as well. Bob Fisher, were you going to say the same thing I just did?
Well, probably, yes, that's correct. But no, I just want to clarify my earlier remarks that when I was on these federal meetings, it was about SRF dollars. I can't speak.
Do you want to be on video?
I don't need video, I just audio's fine.
So, yeah, SRF seems to be targeted towards CSOs, what little information I have. Thank you.
Mark, I'm going to ask kind of a process question. I started the meeting because you were late, but do you want to take over as chair, or do you want me to just continue with my fabulous facilitation skills here?
Yeah, no, I think you should just carry on.
All right, let's go to Hillary. I see your hand up next. Thank you.
So along the septic lines also, this is something that would have to maybe be legislated, and I don't know if we even want to go here, but there's certainly a lot of private septic, especially around lakes, that needs to be repaired or updated, and they're very expensive, and a lot of people just avoid doing it because they can't afford it. But there's state revolving loan funding for those type of projects, I believe, but there's definitely no grant funding. And the position of ANR has been that that's a private sort of problem, that's a homeowner problem, that's something that should be taken care of privately. But I just wanted to put out there that that might be something where we should consider having a conversation about, just in case it's something we'd want to sort of think about from a legislative side, or however we would make that happen if we thought that was important.
That's a great point. Carol?
Thanks. From the notes that I read from the meeting last time, I think that was a priority to try to get the data to see what that impact is of lakeside properties. We weren't sure what that is. I wish we had that data now, of course, because we've got the funding now. But if the funding is going to be over, a number of years, then maybe we quickly, who could do that data collection quickly? Is that the state who would do it? Because so whoever would be doing that, then we should say we want to prioritize that if we do, getting the data to see if it's worth investing in. And there's the 3-acre stormwater rule that we know already is here, and we know the people who are on that list. And that is another place where there is not funding set aside, to the best of my knowledge. So that and the combined sewer overflow, we really have probably enough data to be able to speak very authoritatively about those two areas for funding.
I would offer that we had talked, I think, at the retreat about reports that had been done, or there was some over the years reports on the septic system impact on Lake Champlain. Carrie, I don't know if you remember this at all, or have access, or we could get access, but I thought we had talked about maybe hiring someone to do kind of a meta-analysis of what had been done already, and what kind of reports were out there, and bring that to the CAC. Sarah, I have Brenda on here as well that's raised their hand, but maybe Sarah, do you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, I was just going to share the update about where the state is thinking some of the ARPA dollars will go, if that would be helpful. I know that Neil shared some of that information, and my kids are doing some construction projects downstairs, so I don't know if you can hear that. But you know, over $100 million will go to water infrastructure, including combined sewer, 3-acre stormwater treatment, and municipal assistance for pre-treatment. So if there's any other questions, but I just wanted to just mention that some of the things that are being talked about are already being planned to be used for the ARPA investment.
Great, thank you, Sarah.
Sarah, could you just repeat that number again quickly? Sorry.
So I think it's in excess of $100 million towards water infrastructure. And for the state fiscal year 22, the legislature appropriated $10 million. And some of those dollars will go to Agency of Ag for BMPs, 3-acre stormwater, and municipal pollution control grants. And also the board approved adjustments to the Clean Water Fund allocations so that some of the spending that was planned to go in those areas can be freed up to go towards natural resources restoration, municipal roads, and partner support line items. So things that aren't eligible for ARPA, the ARPA dollars are still freeing up other parts so that more dollars can go into those areas.
Brenda.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to ask your thoughts on the idea that, you know, this is such a hot topic right now, and there are some.
Brenda, you're going in and out. I'm not sure if everybody else is. I'm not getting everything you're saying.
Many groups discuss. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll put my comment in chat.
Or if you turn your camera off, you could have. Sometimes that works better if service is disrupted.
Let's see if this helps. If not, I'll just let me know. Can you hear me now?
Yep, much better. Thank you.
Okay, great. So what I was saying is that, you know, there's several groups, because this is such a hot topic, who are thinking about proposals for how this influx of public money should be spent, you know, both specific to fresh water, but also related, you know, in the forest and climate groups. And I'm just wondering if you've thought about whether or not it might be powerful to have kind of a combined proposal, rather than maybe what might be perceived as competing proposals to committees around, you know, how the influx of federal funds should be spent. If you've thought about that, and just any recommendations you might have about coordinating these recommendations.
That's a great point. I know, Mark, we definitely have had some conversations more about climate as well, but what do you think? It might take a little more thought.
Sorry, I'm not sure what the question is.
Yeah, I could just rephrase quickly. I think that, there will be different proposals coming in, different groups. That we have an NGO group that, the Water Caucus, that's talking about recommendations for how all these funding could be spent. The Technical Advisory Committee for the Lake Champlain Basin are also talking about this. Outside of the water, we have, groups for forest and climate who are also talking about proposals for the influx of funding. And the question is whether you all think that there's merit in looking towards more of a combined proposal amongst these various groups, so that we're not all submitting like 5 different proposals, but somehow come together as a community to propose how funding should be allocated.
I think we're talking about 2 different things in my mind, right? We do our action plan every year.
Mm-hmm.
From the CAC, that we're considering putting priority for the federal funding maybe at the top, potentially as a solution, but whereas that could either reinforce maybe what some of the other action groups around the state or NGOs are thinking as well. So that's one way of looking at it. Or is it that we sign our names, the CA, Citizens Advisory Committee for Lake Champlain signs on to a priority list of ways to allocate this funding that's also endorsed by other groups. Right. So we still, I think, we still legislatively, I have to produce an action plan from the CAC that could focus on the funding, right? This is how we think the money should be allocated. Or it could just be, or it could just take the model of our current action plan. But what I'm hearing you say is you think it would be more powerful for us to work with other partners. Or it's, to me, I guess it's an and. I don't know, Mark or Carol, I see your hand up as well. Either one of you could weigh in.
Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
Oh, well, I would just say before we put together what we are prioritizing for our water requests, that we could listen to what the other groups, is there something in writing from the other groups that if we looked at what they are thinking about, then we can even negotiate with them beforehand and try to come up with something that is in sync. But I think in the end, we have to say what we think, I do think it would be strong if we aren't fighting with each other and instead come with a plan. Great, but it depends on what's in the plan.
Sure.
Yeah, Carol, I agree. I think that we have to develop our priorities and decide, as Denise mentioned, whether or not a plan around recommendations for allocation of funds from ARPA as they evolve, as it becomes clear what they're available for, as the various agencies adapt their priorities to this new flush of funds coming in and are settled on how they're going to use them, and then how do we prioritize the remainder, or I'm not sure how much influence we have in some of the decisions that have already been made with the agency to move things along. So I still think that we need to be working on our action plan priorities and try to dovetail opportunistically with funds that might perhaps accelerate some of the priorities that we're putting forward. I know from and apologies for missing some of the earlier discussion, But one of our priorities has been to dig into that data around septic, acknowledging that it is likely not a huge load on the lake, but I think there's a lot of unknown. And our discussion at the retreat was that we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of failed systems that are just being completely ignored, and there's no requirement. I think we brought up House 44. I think it was. There's no requirement that septic tanks are regularly inspected and functioning, and that technology is readily available and not terribly expensive to have someone do that analysis. I guess we're blessed with low water tables and theoretically more effective functioning systems, but we also know these pulses of rain aren't doing good things for them either. So, I think we need to dig into our prioritization before we consider allocation of funding issues. That's my sense.
Carrie?
Yeah, I think we're not very far off because we're all talking about fundamentally water quality. And we know we still need to meet our phosphorus and nutrient pollution load reductions. That's where we will see more investment in nature-based solutions, for example, more investments in the 3-acre permit, stormwater permit, for example. And yet, I think what we were talking about with respect to septics is, yeah, it's not necessarily a nutrient loading problem, but it is a public health issue, as well as a outdoor recreation, public asset value as well.
Yep.
And I think that's perhaps how we can talk about it in the action plan as we develop, is that we still want to stay on course with our nutrient load reductions across all sectors. How are we doing in that? And secondly, how do we address the public health recreational needs? And that gets into these septic issues. I still think we need to keep putting focus on nuisance species and, of course, the emerging chemicals of concern. The infrastructure issue, I think, is worthy of its own, I guess, bullet, so to speak, because we're dealing with a number of issues. One is it's related to that water quality or the ick factor when you have combined systems, but it is also about aging infrastructure. And thirdly, something that Mark had talked about in terms of climate resilience. We have, with that aging infrastructure, we have vulnerable systems out there. And whether it's from flooding or from leakage, which is an impact on, when we have droughts. So I think that infrastructure element is important. And then finally, my fourth point on that infrastructure is that it gets something that Hillary had mentioned about rural communities in the basin. Because yes, we have aging infrastructure. We also have lead and copper issues, lead in particular with the new EPA lead and copper rule coming down the pike. So that will add to that infrastructure issue. But the fact that we still have rural communities wanting that kind of dual benefit of sustaining their own local economy while providing important, water quality improvements, such as having access to maybe a decentralized wastewater system, for example. So I think that's another element of an infrastructure bullet that can help emphasize why we are concerned about and supportive of investments, whether federal and state or through state revolving funds or otherwise, investments in infrastructure.
Hey, can I just interrupt the meeting, Bob? I'm trying to find the conversation piece. Your camera keeps going on and off, and I'm not sure what it's not your face that's coming on. It's like a,
No, I know. No, I'm so sorry because I'm completely lame. I can't get the camera to flip. I can turn it around, but then I can't see you all. Sorry, I'm on my phone. Sorry, I got upset there. Sorry. I'm trying. I don't.
I was trying to figure out what you were doing, and I just wanted to make sure that you knew that that was happening. Okay, Carol.
Well, no, I appreciate that, and I'm pretty old. I could have been flopping around. Who knows? Thank you.
Carol.
Thank you. So I'm thinking all the time about climate migration and now COVID-19 migration and Act 250 and trying to keep our development in our cities and town centers and keep a working landscape and then keep our unfragmented forests and so forth. Okay, so I am very eager to have helping small towns with their wastewater infrastructure, and I don't know what to call it. I think Carrie said it the right way, of course, but so that when development comes, it comes where we want it to come, not necessarily because we can make enough rules about that, but because it makes sense to have it happen in the towns and city centers and village centers. So whatever that would be called, I would say that should be a priority also.
Carrie.
And if I may offer, I know some people are leaving early. I just wanted to get this idea out there. But I think this era we're living in is so transformative, whether it's related to COVID and the disruptions that caused, or whether it's related to inequities that we are now becoming more and more aware of in our society. And so I also throw out the opportunity for us to be thinking about the equity and justice issues relating to our investments, and that could be in the form of wanting to ensure that we have in place the right policies or programs that are welcoming of people that are here, certainly are already here, or who may be coming here. And with that lens, I think focusing on or supporting an environmental justice type of element will just ensure that we're considering all opportunities for a more equitable society. I don't know what that would exactly look like, but at least that's something we can chew on as we develop this action plan.
I think calling it out is a really important thing. Carrie. Hi, Senator Bray.
Hi, I can't see anyone yet. Sorry, I'm joining late. We're working late, and you know how it is. You have to make sun while the sun shines, especially when you're working outdoors. So sorry to be joining late, but happy to be here.
Carrie, I know that the Basin program in the summit that we participated in over the summer, particularly for recreation access, and Lauren or Katie might clarify this a bit, but I know it rose to the top for education outreach and the more broad goals for opportunities for action. And as that work progresses, you know, we'll be trying to tie that in, both their DEI work within the Basin program, but also how their grant making and other opportunities within Opportunity Action are focused on the sort of environmental justice and inclusion opportunities as we're thinking about recreation access, traditionally sort of disenfranchised voices finding ways to do a better job inviting them to be participating in a lot of this decision making and consideration. So the Basin program is definitely prioritizing that now.
That's wonderful and terrific to hear. And an added element to that is, in addition to our pollution prevention work, how do we prevent overburdening in terms of having overburdening occur? That is when one group of our neighbors are experiencing a disproportionate amount of impact associated with our land use choices or our permitting actions or what have you. So so I appreciate that. I think we could potentially add to that a focus on the prevention of a degradation that could result in overburdening. And that leads to the whole concept behind the cumulative impacts of our decision making over time.
Right.
And how do we become mindful of that and incorporate that into priority setting?
Excellent. Any other comments on this? As there's a lot to chew on here. I think we're going to have a really robust work group working on the action plan and other items. And I'm hoping that many of us will join in that effort so that we can have a really thoughtful plan this year. So Mark, before you joined, the committee discussed having the work group meet to put some thought into the action plan this year and bring it to the full CAC. And so what I requested was that people email you, me, or Katie what their interest in being part of that work group.
Okay, terrific. Thanks.
I'm hoping that someone is capturing all of these really wonderful thoughts and ideas. Is that Lauren that would be doing that?
Katie is.
Katie is, okay, excellent.
Yeah, we've got it and it's recorded, so I can always go back and refer to fill in any spots I missed. I don't want to move us on from this conversation if we're not ready yet, but we do have a quorum if we want to go back and vote on the meeting summary.
I would, I think that's a good idea. Carol, do you have a?
Yeah, I have a motion that we approve the meeting summary from that date.
Thank you. I was just going to ask, do I have a second?
I'll second. Mark.
Mark, you'll second?
Yeah.
Great. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, minutes passed, or meeting summary from the last meeting passed. Katie, thank you for doing that and paying attention. I appreciate that.
Yep, sure thing.
Is Eric Clifford? Is that the Eric who's the guest?
Yes.
Eric Howe. Okay, great. Thanks. I was doing my own little count for quorum.
Katie, would you mind pulling up the agenda one more time? Hi, Eric.
Hi.
Well, actually, the next thing on the agenda is really looking to our legislative leadership to help us understand what would be a good opportunity to advance the action plan. Do we want to have that conversation now?
So this Mark, I think that we wanted to get to work on the action plan sooner rather than later. And at the retreat, there was some considerable discussion, particularly from our legislative members, to work with them to help provide opportunities as we're working with the work group and bringing in the action plan from the rest of the members to try to dovetail that in some of the priorities that are being developed within the legislative committees. And so I think it would be helpful from Senator Bray and Representative Dolan and Odie today, if as you're preparing your work leading up to the January start, if you could give us updates on some of the priorities that we might find opportunities to help advance and prioritize within our work. As we discussed before, oftentimes by the time we get the opportunity to deliver our action plan and have considered legislative initiatives, they're past any consideration for us to influence. Once we're in there in January or February. So I think there was some discussion on strategies for us to just increase our effectiveness in participating with some of the pre-legislative session work and sort of fine-tune our action plan and help us be more effective with your work. So I don't know if you have any more considerations as August ended and folks are starting to gear up for the session, and whether you have any insights that you might share with us now.
Go ahead, Carol.
Happy to respond if you would like. So in that, I think, I think the concern about timing is, as you said, we talked about a fair amount because particularly in a second year of a biennium, things move quickly and the window for getting things moving is on the calendar. It's theoretically as long, but the time there's a lot more pressure in the second year because things that have carried over from the first year will already occupy part of our calendar, and there are issues going from Senate to House and vice versa that have we're already, our dance card is filling up a little bit, and I think. So that anyway, I think it's wise that we're talking about it now. I'm, really interested in. So I just came in. I would want to review the action plan more and understand how it's the priorities of the group because, I suppose I know what I'm thinking about, but my interest in joining the Lake Champlain Committee was to become better informed about the thoughts of the members of this group and try to be a better liaison to the Senate, particularly since I chair Senate Natural. So it's not the, and the timing is good also. I think most chairs right now are starting to have meetings once Labor Day goes by with advocacy groups. And I've already had conversations with folks in the last 2 weeks. And there's more meetings coming because people will start to express their desires for what we might get to. So with that said, I think I would just say I'm happy to respond to the this group and say, I want to understand your priorities so that as I work with others to prioritize all the requests for things to get done, that there's a balance and we make our best investments and best use of opportunities on water quality work. So I'll just say one quick thing, and that is that I've had conversations with some folks over the summer about the, people are always concerned about the effectiveness of our investments. How do we know that we're spending our money in the right way? So I think for me, I'd be very interested in hearing this group's assessment of how well you feel money's flowing to the right projects. So let me stop there.
Thanks, Senator Bray. Carrie?
I'm happy to defer so we could have a conversation of the senator's comments. I think he raises, I think, some important points about reactions to how dollars have been spent. Senator, before you arrived, we did talk about some concerns about the progress we're making in meeting our nutrient load reductions across the state, and part of that has to do with the capacity of state government in getting those dollars out in the ground and doing the work that we are intending to do. I'm very impressed with the state's dashboard and their annual report, but it does show a dampening of progress, partly due to COVID, obviously, but I think some of it may have to do with capacity. So I'm interested in hearing more. And Senator, we also talked about infrastructure needs, both from aging infrastructure to the lead and copper rule coming down to infrastructure relating to CSOs, and how this may be the right time for looking at greater influence of CSO investment. And then we also talked about what Sarah had mentioned, some of the investments with some of the federal dollars was going to pre-treatment, which is absolutely critical for us to have pre-treatment prior to discharging effluent that may have PFAS chemicals and other toxic chemicals. It's a requirement of the Federal Clean Water Act anyway. And so that's a good use of funding in my mind. But it's a really important point to constantly ask ourselves if we are meeting our targets in the time frame we are intended to meet those targets, and are we in particular maximizing? In my mind, are we? This was a point that the Nature Conservancy representative, I didn't catch her name, but she made about wanting to maximize the benefits we realize with nature-based solutions too, both from a resiliency perspective and water quality perspective. But your points are, in my mind, are important. I'm just one person. You're right. We need to hear more about from CAC generally and from the public about these investments and the priority setting in these investments.
Sure. Well, thanks for filling me in, and sorry I wasn't present for that part of the discussion. On the leachate area, to me it's there's obviously a water quality and public health impact, but the source of the issue is solid waste. And so I think I'd want to have an eyes wide open discussion about whether or not the solid waste handling system should be providing the funds to go to pretreatment, and at least as it comes to toxins and leachate that then gets delivered to wastewater treatment facilities. Just not to start a debate over that, but I just feel like everyone's supposed to pull their own weight, and this to me is a water quality impact that's coming out of how we handle solid waste. So.
And that actually dovetailed with some of the conversation that we've had, and Bob often reminds us, is if we do a better job with inspecting and pumping septic tanks, etc., the septage is a potential source of contaminants, and land application has its issues, and running them through the wastewater treatment plants has similar issues, and there's limited increasing challenges and less incentives for those facilities to take the septage. And so it's just becoming a compounding problem and a compounding challenge. Especially when 50, almost 60% of wastewater is disposed of through septic fields in the state. So that was one of our priorities that came up from discussions over the summer, was to really try to get a better handle on how is septic impacting groundwater, surface water, particularly the lakeshore. What does a program look like to try to either monitor or create incentives for inspection and proper maintenance? And then what does that do with what I assume would be an increase in tonnage and gallonage of septage? Where is that going to go? And Bob's reminded us often that there's real challenges there. Bob?
Yeah. Just quickly to address Senator Bray, I 100% agree with your comments. And we should not confuse leachate and septage. It's two completely different things, more or less.
Right.
It's economic reasons that generally the wastewater treatment plants have taken it. It would leave a huge hole in their budget at this moment. But as an operator, leachate is really no fun.
Can I add one other thing, as if it weren't complex enough, but there's so many interconnections. One of the other areas of concern that relates to solid waste, but ultimately has a water quality impact, is the depackaging, the movement to mechanical depackaging for food residuals. And we're seeing plastics and microplastics getting incorporated into that residual slurry. And then depending on where that goes, it's a little melodramatic to say it this way, but I'm worried that we could be on our way to creating brown fields out of some of our green fields that are currently receiving what is being intended to be turned into compost. So for an optimistic person, I'm sounding like a bummer. But we are just seeing more vectors for contamination that ultimately and then end up flowing through to water in the end. So that's just I think that's on our Senate Naturals to-do list, is to try to look into that piece before it gets too far down the road and becomes yet a sizable vector for water pollution.
And hi, this is Bob again. I'm sorry for my internet's not very good right here. And I 100% agree again. That's very important. But on a much larger scale, septage is releasing all those PFAS, et cetera, right to the ground. And then things that are permitted are beyond me, like the Bristol system. It's a large septic tank draining down into a field. I hope that's tested for everything across from their drinking system. I mean, I just, once again, I'm highly opposed to wastewater. Is an extremely complicated, expensive thing. And, me, I just have a major issue with septage, which is Roman technology. Thank you. Sorry. And this is my own opinion. Thank you.
Carrie, did you have more?
I did. I think the question was about hearing from the legislators about priorities that we would be working on to help provide a bit of insight perhaps into the what we anticipate coming up in the foreseeable future. And Senator Bray had talked about some of these important issues. I think related to that is obviously when he mentioned about how effective our investments are, it harkens to me or reminds me of that performance report that we produce annually. And I think it's worthy for us to look at that performance report and also look at our budgets and how we are supporting the implementation of our pollutant reduction plans moving forward. So that budgetary process is important, and the education in terms of understanding how we're performing in terms of meeting our clean water goals, nutrient load reduction goals in particular, regarding the TMDL. Other priorities, and then the senator mentioned about solid waste, and that's an ongoing issue. I appreciate him mentioning that because of the House passed a bottle bill, which also has a huge climate reduction goal. Not to mention, we would be able to maximize the important and growing market of cleaner recyclable materials for the industries that are depending more and more on cleaner recyclable materials, including the large multinational bottling companies such as Pepsi, Coca-Cola, and the like. So that solid waste series of questions around solid waste is ongoing. Other things to be aware of or to remind ourselves is the as you know, in 2020, was it, when we passed the Global Warming Solutions Act, and that will result in an adopted plan by December 1st. There's a shall, the council shall adopt a plan by December 1st, and contained in that will be a number of recommendations or opportunities across all sectors for us to be evaluating. And I presume, even though passing that Global Warming Solutions Act was quite a challenge, it's even going to be overshadowed by the breadth of need for us to not only reduce our carbon or our greenhouse gas footprint. How do we do that cost effectively, collaboratively, across all sectors? How do we maximize those values or the public benefit from those sorts of actions? And how do we keep in mind how vulnerable we are for future flooding? And now we've seen impacts of drought, extended drought. And so that resilience, while it may not have been incorporated in the Global Warming Solutions Act, resilience will mean looking at carbon storage, carbon sequestration, flood resiliency. Are we there, and have we done enough actions to help our communities be resilient? So I just wanted to make sure I've had the opportunity to flag these the climate-related challenges that will be in front of us in very short order. And then finally, on a point we mentioned earlier about justice issues, environmental justice. Again, I think this is a really pivotal point for us to ensure that we're not creating into the future overburdening that we'll then have to recover, pay for. That pollution prevention or prevention of overburdening, but also how important it is to have a welcoming, equitable society, and what does that look like? So having the right policies in place to ensure that we are being as inviting, thoughtful, mindful, and address the inequities that are in front of us today.
Thanks, Carrie. I know that hopefully our next our meeting in October, we'll have, and I'm not going to get her name correct, Dr. Giroux from the Climate Council to give a presentation. She's obviously busy with their roadshow, getting it out. I think there's half a dozen meetings coming up over the next couple of weeks, but we hope to have her present to us at our next meeting. That was a priority for us too. So it's 6:20, and I think we need to move on. I know Denise said that she's asked folks to reach out with their ability and desire to be involved in a work group, the action plan work group. So I encourage our members to do that. Historically, we've had 5 to 6 people as a subgroup to work on that. That can work outside of our regular public meetings to help frame that and then bring recommendations to the CAC for more consideration and refinement of the action plan. I think our goal would be to have the action plan fairly well cooked by Thanksgiving in very early December, so that we can get it out there. So there's a lot of work over the next 2 months on that. And so I appreciate everyone's interest, and thanks in advance for your participation in that. So next on our agenda is advisory committee coordination with Katie Darr. We've been talking about opportunities for a joint CAC meeting with Quebec and New York, and some common threads between or amongst those that we could have some good learning opportunities. And so she's going to carry forward from here. Thanks, Katie.
Mark, do you want to cover the next item first, since some folks have to hop off early?
Oh yeah, what if we're going to lose a quorum, I'd like to just to move on that, and I think it should be fairly quickly. Yeah. Denise, are you saying you're leaving?
I will stay while we have a quorum, but I do have to pick up a child, and would transfer you to my phone, but the security issue is affecting my ability to get on Teams on my phone too. So.
Okay. All right. So let's move to committee membership and governance. At our retreat, we had a request and recommendation from Corinna Daly, and we've shared her bio with everyone as a potential, as a candidate for membership for the CAC. We have 2 open seats, and the process has been to ask potential candidates to provide a letter of interest and a bio to the CAC for consideration. And then our process has been to develop consensus and then make a recommendation to Secretary Moore and the governor, and ask that potential candidate to also fill out the governor's commission online application. So we had some limited discussion with about Corinna, but I'd like to move that we make the recommendation for her membership to fulfill the open public at large seat, and then we can move on from there. Is there a second or any discussion before?
I would like to second if I could, Mark.
Okay. So Hillary second. The discussion now is recommendation of Corinna Daly as a member of the CAC to Secretary Moore and Governor Scott. Is there any further discussion? Carrie?
I'm just interested to know what was the process for identifying.
The process has been, when there's an open candidate or open membership, it is, we don't notice it, but we don't advertise there's a opening available. It's on the website that there's a vacancy. and throughout the network of people either at the Basin program or within the CAC membership, considerations for diversity, geography, skill sets. We've had discussions regarding those, and then we wait for someone to reach out with a desire and a willingness to commit to the CAC. We've had conversations, shared our committee member manual, and invited them to present a letter of interest and a bio, which is not required for the governor's approval, but it's been part of our process for as long as I've been on the CAC. They still need to submit an application through the governor's commission board application process, and then wait. The most recently, all of the members were acting with expired terms. Over half were acting with terms that have been expired for over a year. So that was just approved by the governor. Nominations were approved by the governor, I think, finally in July, just before our retreat. So we're just trying to fill out the next two.
Thank you.
Is there another hand up? I don't see. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of making the recommendation to Secretary Moore and Governor Scott for the candidacy of Corinna Daly?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention?
So Mark, I'm going to abstain just because of having the unusual relationship being a member of the legislature making a recommendation to the governor. Not opposing or questioning the recommendation, and you don't want to cross wires from the two branches of government.
Okay.
Chris, you just threw me under the bus.
Sorry.
All right. Thanks, Senator Bray. We'll note your abstention. Thanks. We'll make that recommendation. I'll follow with Corinna and try to move that along. We do have an additional public at large membership. We've talked with the Basin program. They're having some consideration of adopting perhaps a slightly different process. It's not well defined yet, but some way of being more inclusive of trying to get that diversity of voice on the CAC. And so we'll keep working with them as their process evolves. I know they're working on DEI initiatives, and a recent RFP came out, and we hope to be able to learn from that and work with them on systems and processes within the CAC. And then if the state is making any recommendations through the governor's office on how boards and commissions evolve those processes, we'll be responsive to that too. So thanks again. Thanks, Katie, for reminding me that we might lose the quorum. So Katie, if you want to pick up again, we'll jump to the advisory committee coordination.
Sure, thank you. And your last point segued nicely into one of the items I wanted to touch on today. So with the meeting materials, I sent out a little one-pager about a proposal for a youth advisory committee for the Lake Champlain Basin program. And that was based on an idea from the Education and Outreach Committee. I've been doing research on existing youth advisory committees and youth boards and things like that to try to figure out what might work well to increase youth engagement in the management of Lake Champlain. So I'll just be walking us through what was in that one pager. Basically, if you didn't get a chance to look at it, don't worry about it. And knowing that all of the different committees for the Basin program have slightly different structures, you know, I'm in the process of presenting this to the different advisory committees and really hoping to get everyone's feedback to nail down what a feasible structure and function for the youth advisory committee would be, with the goal of presenting this to the executive committee in October. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, hopefully you're seeing that in presentation mode. So again, we've talked about that the Basin Program committees lack the full diversity that represents the populations that live, work, and play in the Lake Champlain Basin. Youth perspectives are largely absent, and committees and boards all over, not unique to the Basin program. Youth under 25 and especially under 18 are notably left out of discussions on topics in which they're capable of participating in discussions and typically in ones in which they have the most at stake. So the goals of this youth advisory committee generally would be to engage the next generation of Lake Champlain managers, recreationalists, decision makers, et cetera, and to amplify youth voices in the management of Lake Champlain. Some of the co-benefits that are associated with this kind of structure, obviously diversifying the committee perspectives, career development for youth in the basin, including mentorship with the committee members, skill building, workforce development, and active youth involvement in management discussions and decisions. So there are two slightly different proposed structures here. The first idea I had was for a sort of standalone youth advisory committee with each member serving on or as a liaison to an existing advisory committee. This would satisfy desires to improve youth representation on committees and provide youth voices with their own dedicated platform within the Basin program organizational framework. After speaking to some other folks and getting outside of my own brain on this, it seems like this might not be the most feasible option right now. Instead, leaning towards a youth advisory committee as a subcommittee of the Education and Outreach Committee, with the youth advisory committee members assigned a mentor from one of the other existing advisory committees. Again, this would still improve youth engagement on committees and provide youth voices with a dedicated platform. It just wouldn't be as rigid and require as many adjustments to the organizational structure of the different committees and to the Basin program framework as a whole. Something to note, youth is really broadly defined as ages between 12 and 35. What I'm leaning towards right now and would be curious to hear everyone else's thoughts on is that, you know, for these purposes, we should consider targeting members ages 16 to 35. There are additional considerations for participants and members under 18, but that 16 to 17 range seems to be a good bridge to younger folks as well, who maybe wouldn't have the capacity to sit on the committee yet. So some potential youth advisory committee activities, we don't want them to just be attending meetings. We want to have them be actively involved in things as well. So outreach on specific lake issues to new audiences, participation on grant review committees, maybe the development of their own action plan or focus document, and then some more hands-on things like aquatic invasive species harvest, tree plantings, et cetera, other stewardship activities like that. These are just some of the benefits of youth participation. So increased engagement of younger generations in the conservation, preservation, and management of the natural and cultural resources in Lake Champlain Basin. Again, broadening the perspectives present on the committees. It would really demonstrate a commitment to inclusive engagement in the management of the basin. Youth members can bring a lot of new and creative ideas into play. We could expand our outreach on lake issues to new and younger audiences, and again, building capacity for the future and empowering youth constituency. Some of the challenges that might be associated with this, there are additional logistical considerations and potential barriers, meeting timing, transportation, parental permission for members under 18. These virtual and hybrid meetings alleviate some of those issues, but it's necessary to really, if we pursue this, to think through what those other barriers might be and really try to find ways to overcome them to meaningfully engage the youth perspectives. And another note, youth may have larger financial barriers to participation, so thinking about ways to reduce equity issues across age brackets and career stages when asking youth and other underrepresented communities to serve on committees. So with that, I would be very curious to hear everyone's thoughts on potentially pursuing a youth advisory committee, if that's something as a subcommittee of the Education and Outreach Committee. I think that would be a good way to test the waters before trying to upend the whole organizational structure of the Basin program. Also happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Carrie.
35 seems pretty old. So especially for our interests, I appreciate being broad enough to get representation, but I just flagged that as a mom of a couple of 20-year-olds, I think there's a big gap between in their minds what their priorities may be and us older folks. I'm just 38, so.
Well, I think that's a fair point. I believe the UN goes by 18 to 35 for their youth engagement. I think it's probably easier to engage those people at the upper end of that range in terms of career stage and maybe comfort in participating in these kinds of things. But we could definitely decrease that range a little bit.
Right? It's not to suggest otherwise. It just was surprising to me. That's all.
Yeah, I definitely don't think we want to have a 12-year-old on a TAC committee meeting, but 35 is also the other end of the spectrum. We might want to shrink down.
Senator Bray?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to know that that range comes from the UN. I thought it was maybe a reflection of the demographics of our state that we were calling 35-year-olds youths. But either way, I think it's great that to be advancing this, because it's the health of the organization. And then I think climate change has shown a lot of people that there are a lot of younger folks who have plenty to say, and we are part of, we're the stewards most responsible at the moment for the world they're inheriting. And I think it'd be refreshing to have more youth voices, participating. Personally, I look forward always to learning from younger Vermonters. So, and it seems like a healthy thing for this organization in terms of its growth and development over time, to make sure there are plenty of people interested in serving at some point, for instance, on the committee.
Yeah, I think that just proactively creating a youth advisory committee is the first basic step of creating that invitation for youth. I think many don't feel like, let me rephrase that with my own kids. They'd feel like we've screwed it all up. And we've dumped it on them to have to fix it. And yet we're not even inviting them to be part of the solution and processes. So they've got a little bit of disdain for us older folks. That's been my experience. But we, at the same time, I just happened to be digging through old photographs, and I found a photograph. My daughter tagged along to one of our legislative action plan days many years ago. I think she was maybe in 7th or 8th grade. And obviously I'm her proud dad, but I think the legislators paid far more attention to her sitting at a table presenting her considerations on issues related to the action plan we were presenting than anyone else that was sitting at the table doing that. So I do think that their voice can be more powerful and maybe more effective with our work. And so I'm excited for Katie to be taking the opportunity to advance this. How it works within the CAC and how we might bring sort of youth on board, that's not clear to me. There may be some limitations from the administration and just their structure and process, but I can't imagine that they wouldn't be as welcoming to bring youth onto the committee, whatever age range it is, as much as on the Basin program and bringing them into that infrastructure. So. Any more discussion? Katie, I don't know if you wanted a straw poll of support. I think my sense is you have our enthusiastic support, and as your process within the Basin program continues to evolve, opportunities to perhaps add youth membership connected to us with a similar model. I think there's ways we could find to make that work for the as Senator Bray and Representative Dolan said, for sort of the health of this group and the sort of development of leadership within the CAC. So
great. Yeah, we can transition to the joint meeting discussion. So just a quick update on that. Obviously, we did not have our September joint meeting, but that is giving us some more time to plan for a more robust meeting later on in the fall. The chairs of all 3 CACs met. Sounds like Quebec is a little more concerned with implementation of projects, but they're happy to support us in whatever initiatives we're trying to push forward. So where there's the most overlap right now and interest between New York and Vermont seems to be on the septic issues. So it seems like a good idea at some point in the fall to pursue a joint meeting around those. Initial thoughts on that. New York CAC already received a presentation from David Miller at the Adirondack Council about the septic white paper that he put together, and that was shared with the July retreat materials, and I'll just throw it. But I think we could get an abbreviated version of that presentation. Another note of interest, I know that Senator Bray at the July retreat mentioned an interest in learning more about what Lake George was doing, since they are known for having pretty good water quality. The Lake George Park Commission actually organized a committee to look at water quality impacts of septic systems around Lake George. And they had their first meeting in July, so it would be great to get a brief presentation from them as well. I'll keep looking around for someone who might be able to present on some of those impacts of septic and whether they're localized, and other notes that have been brought up in this meeting and in others. But if you have any other ideas for presentations you would like to see related to that, please do let me know, or any additional thoughts on joint meetings, and we'll continue to plan that. Senator Bray?
Sure. Can't remember if we discussed it briefly or not, but for our neighbors in Quebec, particularly on Lake Memphremagog, water quality issues related to PFAS and leachate and discharge through treatment facilities has been a pretty public issue and a sensitive one. So it would be a great opportunity for, and it's been a little difficult working across the border with people in the last 2 years. So I would hope that we could allocate some of our time to hearing from them about that and being able to be ready to respond on our side as well, since it's a shared lake. And I think City of Sherbrooke, which is, I guess, well, 180,000 people, I think, in Canada take their drinking water from ACOG. So important source of water for them. And sorry, one last thing. Since we're the source of their concern, I think reaching out to them, inviting that, conversation will be helpful to all parties.
Great, thank you.
Another potential meeting issue was we reached out to a soil scientist, agroecologist at the University of Vermont, who recently gave a presentation on soil health, carbon sequestration, et cetera, to the Climate Council. And so we thought that might be another opportunity for a common theme for all of the CACs to be considering around ag and climate and water quality issues. So hopefully we'll try to, if not for the joint meeting, we'd like to have her give a presentation for us also.
Great. I have a quick question, Mark, about that soil health presentation. Do you know if it also examined soil health from the perspective of impacts on soil health of, well, I guess in law they're referred to as economic poisons, basically pesticides. We're usually worrying about phosphorus leaving farms, but I think if phosphorus is leaving farms, other things may also be leaving. And I don't know the extent to which that's a problem, but I haven't heard much on that, and it would be helpful to learn more about that if that's within the area of expertise of this UVM faculty member.
I believe from my review of the presentation that she did, I believe that she did touch base on that, but Pierre Leduc at the OBVBM in Quebec, the CAC equivalent in Quebec, he shared with us over the summer some recent studies that showed from Quebec, documenting that the utilization of those economic poisons, particularly the neonics on seeds, actually didn't improve yield compared to non-economic poison seeds and practices on fields in Quebec. So he was keen about that, and that their focus has been on things like that, the direct effectiveness of implementation programs, whether it's fixing tile drains, water diversions, infiltration basins, or changing practices. So perhaps he was eager to provide an opportunity for follow-up on that. So we'll have a conversation with Pierre and see whether they might be able to bring that expertise.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, so I think we'll work on the date on what our joint meeting will be. I'd like to try to accomplish it in one of the next few meetings. And as we're leading into Well, Katie, do you have anything more on CAC joint meeting planning?
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. And so then as we're leading up to sort of our meeting wrap up for the day and planning for next meeting, right now our meeting would be scheduled for Indigenous Peoples Day on the 11th of October. And sometimes in the past that's been a problem for folks. It's vacation, it's a long weekend, there's things going on. And so I just want to reconfirm that that works for most everyone. If not, I would just recommend that we push it to the following day unless that's a conflict for people. I know we lost our quorum. I think Denise is back. Let me see.
Yeah, I'm back. What day is that? Is that the 11th?
October 11th, yes.
It does work for me. But if it's a struggle for others, maybe we need to look at a different day.
Is there much energy to change it? Or does the 11th tend to work for people? They're back home from a long weekend and clock works for most. Any of the members have a specific conflict for that date?
This is Carrie. I'll be coming back that day. I presume it would still be remote and at 5 o'clock.
Yes.
Yeah, I should be able to make it.
Okay. Then I guess let's just keep it at that as is, and we'll work on that. So that may be a joint meeting. Otherwise, the November meeting will be a joint meeting. For certainly for the October meeting, a portion of the meeting will be to address any work that the action plan work group has made and bring up any considerations for action plan. Denise?
Well, I was just gonna ask if the action plan, anybody who's interested in being on the action plan work group should probably get, what's today, Monday? Maybe by Friday, let us know so that we can plan a meeting. Just with people's schedules, a month goes by really fast, it seems. So if we could at least get one meeting together where we review the current action plan and make edits so that we have something to present to this team next month. So is Friday enough time to give people enough time to decide whether or not they want to be part of a work group? There's not enough people to ask right now, Mark, but maybe we could send out an email.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, we'll send an email. I'll send one out, or you and I can send one out reminding folks to please be responsive about joining that work group. And I think it would be great to get a meeting in, as soon as next week, if we can, to just keep the process going.
I feel like we have some really good ideas and themes that I've heard over the last 2 meetings that I've attended, and would be excited to kind of dive into that before too long.
Great.
Mark, it's Chris Bray. I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
On the action plan. Would it be possible for someone to send out the most current version prior to the meeting on the 11th? So maybe by no later than Friday, the Friday preceding, so people could take a look over the weekend, something like that. Maybe that's already part of your plan.
Yes, I think that our plan would be that what's happened in the past, and I think we'll probably start there again, is we've taken the previous year's action plan, began some basic wordsmithing around some shift in themes. Oftentimes the themes stay the same. I take a little different flavor or a little different urgency. And then our goal would be to get that draft action plan out to the CAC membership a week prior to our meeting. So we would have the agenda and everything else out for the 11th, try to get out on the 4th. So that would give about 2 weeks of time for the action plan work group to develop something substantive for consideration.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Carrie, is your hand up? Or is that old?
That's old. Sorry.
Okay.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
This is Bob Fisher. Yeah, I believe I was at that meeting, and Governor Shumlin started quizzing your daughter. I think my youngest daughter was there too.
Right.
But besides that, more importantly, what about the tractor? For anyone got here late, you got a flashlight? You walking back to fix it? What are you gonna do here?
I'll get it tomorrow.
Okay.
It's safe in the middle of a field. It's not going anywhere, right? Someone would have to be quite aggressive in their endeavors to take it. So we'll be good. Thanks. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Again, my apologies for tardiness. I think we made some good progress on framing for the action plan. Please reach out to Denise and I for follow-up on participation with the work group, and we'll get an email out as a reminder by tomorrow. And I think we can adjourn.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.